And hi, everyone. I'm Molly Sylvia. I'm the Vice President of Performance Management at Nickerson. We're headquartered in Boston, but have locations all over the country. We're a fully integrated branding, marketing, and communications agency, predominantly working in what we call the built environment. So, real estate developers, architects, engineers, prop tech organizations. Really appreciate you all joining us this morning and very excited to have Chris Willis joining us from Axios HQ. When we first connected with Chris and started discussing his Chief Pipeline Officer role, which is what he's going to speak about today, I was really fascinated by a lot of his insights about pipeline as what he called the great aligner, which he'll talk more about today. I feel like in so many instances, and we talk about this a lot at Sammy, that friction between sales and marketing and sort of that like power struggle we sometimes see between the two groups. And it was really interesting hearing how he implemented his role as Chief Pipeline Officer to be really that great aligner, and how pipeline is that alignment that everyone needs to achieve, and that really the sales and marketing teams win together and lose together as they both seek to establish and nurture that pipeline. So while it seems very obvious, I think we often take some of that for granted as we work in our various spaces and roles. So today, Chris is going to speak about that Chief Pipeline Officer role, that at that intersection of sales and marketing, talk about what worked, what didn't work, and then also talk to his new role as CMO of Axios HQ, and how his previous Chief Pipeline Officer role has informed some of what he's doing in that current position. So Chris, I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much for joining us.
Fantastic. Let's get this up. Boom. Hello, everybody. Some of you I know, and hello, and good to see you again. Some of you I don't. I'm Chris Willis. I am Chief Pipeline Officer. Nope, not anymore. Sorry, that changed at the beginning of the year. Chief Marketing Officer at Axios HQ. If you don't know Axios HQ, it's a software spinoff from Axios Media. We're headquartered down in DC. We have a beautiful view of the Capitol out of our office windows. But today, I'm going to talk about this Chief Pipeline Officer thing that happened to me a few years ago. And I meant to say it that way. Something happened in 2000-ish, and my CEO at the time said, somebody needs to manage the entire pipeline. And it can be you, it could be me, him, or it could be our head of sales. And I said, it's me, because I don't want it to be you, and I definitely don't want it to be him. But it's important that I note that I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, what does that mean? And what it meant was trying to find that point of alignment so that we all are looking at the same thing. We're all talking about the same thing, and we're all fueling the same thing. And that provocative statement of the day is that this is a way to align. So many of us have worked in organizations where marketing stands up at the QBR and says, look at everything we did. I mean, we're really good at it in marketing, right? I can make anything seem like we did a great job. So look at all the leads that we created. And the sales team or the BDR team, much like this picture, are miserable. Nothing's converting and nothing's closing. But we're over here on the left and we're pumped. Again, marketing's really good at that. If we all focus on one thing and we all focus on it the same way, we're all tied together. We're all going to win or we're going to lose together, and we align this team. Important to note that my work bestie at my last company was the head of sales. There was no sales and marketing divide. We talked every day by choice, not by force. And when I moved to Axios at the beginning of the year, part of my interview process was making sure that that was going to be the same situation that I had here. I met the head of sales. My question to her in my interview was, are you prepared to be glued to me for the next 3 or 4 years? And she said, I've only known you for 57 minutes. I asked her again at the hour. She said, well, now that we're 60 minutes in, yes. And so we are fast friends. Let's talk about that, though. So I agree. Yes, I'll run pipeline. And he started calling me the Chief Pipeline Officer, and it was a funny thing. But he kept calling me that, and he was doing it on purpose, because the focus was getting above marketing, right? So the way that sits in an organization. You might have seen it. This is also synonymous with more of what the president would do in a software company, but I don't think we have a lot of presidents in software companies anymore. It's above the head of marketing and the head of sales. I have reach in both areas. So it's the handoffs. It's marketing to the BDRs, BDRs to sellers. It's creation, and not just meeting creation or lead creation, but everybody's creation, all the way through creation of new opportunities. It's progression, making sure that deals are moving forward, the pipeline has momentum, and we're driving things towards negotiation and close. It's looking through all of our close lost, understanding what's happening in our pipeline, why we're losing opportunities, and how to recycle those. And it's the future health of the business. So looking at quarter plus one, quarter plus two, looking for either where we're going to be successful and how to be successful, or where we're walking into a cliff. We evolved this role as we went forward. In 2020, it was just a thing that we said. And over the course of 20 and 21, we started building out the dashboards and the way that we would run this as a play inside the business. And again, this overlay. So I'm marketing, Shane was sales, and then there's this thing over the top of it, and it's pipeline. And I have the levers of marketing, so it makes sense that it's me. I'm fueling a lot of this. But also, the huge mind shift difference was I'm not looking at marketing contribution. In this role, I don't care where pipeline comes from. And I can be more demanding of the demand organization than I would be if I was just the marketing guy. But I can also be more demanding of the sales organization, put goals in front of them. What am I expecting of the sales organization from a prospecting standpoint? And all of this comes together to be this active management on a week-to-week basis of how everybody is doing their job all the way through the process. And having one person have their eyes on that, having one person be measured on that, helps a lot in bringing the business together. Teaser, do I want this job again? We'll come back. We'll come back to it. I'll close with that. Let's set the stage. So this is an example of what it started to look like, right? So the problem that we've always had, and I think a lot of companies still have, is it's Q1, marketing is working on creating leads. Sales is working on trying to close a Q1 number. And sales is looking at marketing and saying, what can you do to help? Literally nothing. There's nothing that marketing can do in Q1 to help Q1 if your sales cycle is longer than a quarter, right? We're working in the future. Marketing is always out in the future. So starting afresh at the beginning of the year, this model is difficult for the first quarter because there's zero impact. But if it's Q1 and we work at a company with a 2-quarter sales cycle, for instance, I need to be looking from a pipeline standpoint at the next sales cycle. I'm constantly trying to fuel the following sales cycle. So that's going to be Q2. We're looking at a Q2 NSB goal, new subscription business goal of, let's say, 2.1 million, and a Q3 NSB goal of 2.1 million. We've got a conversion rate of 25% because this is a scenario. It's not real. I would love to have a conversion rate of 25% all the time. That'd be great. So now we've got a Q1 pipeline production goal of 16.8 million to cover those 2 quarters, those 2 future quarters. So it's Q1, and I need to end Q1 with 16.8 in unweighted pipeline, wherever that comes from. It's not all going to be creation, obviously. We have rollover. But for the most part, if we want to take all of the outside influences out, we need to get to that number by the end of the quarter so that we're selling into the next sales cycle with enough pipeline to fuel it at our conversion rate. But there's more. It's not just fighting to get every opportunity created, get every lead in, get every opportunity created. It's also the progression of those opportunities, because we have this weighted number that represents essentially the total of the required NSB over the course of conversion through the funnel, right? So a discovery stage, earliest stage opportunity, is probably only worth 10% of its total unweighted value versus a negotiation opportunity sitting all the way at the end or in paperwork that's probably worth like 85%. So there's this constant pressure to be moving these deals forward. So while we've got sellers, and this is why we had this division of labor, while we've got sellers that are in their head focused on Q1, we're still in Q1, they're focused on closing their Q1 number. I, office of the pipeline, am making them do two things at least. The other thing is progress their next sales cycle number. Like, how do I move these opportunities forward? So one of the interesting things about this role was that I met personally with every single salesperson on a regular basis, recurring meetings, to make sure to go through and make sure that they're progressing their deals so that we're building up that weighted pipeline so that when Q1 ends, we have 16.8 in unweighted and we have 4.2 or more in weighted pipeline. And that those two indicators tell me that we're going to walk into the quarter with a really good chance of hitting the number. If we don't, I can also tell you how much we're going to miss by. And what I know is that on a sales cycle basis, so in this case, 2-quarter basis, we're going to make that 4.2 if we have that 4.2 weighted. That's going to happen historically over time. As we watch this happen every sales cycle, we know that historically we're going to hit. So the reverse of that is if we end this quarter going into the next sales cycle with 2.2 in weighted pipeline, I can tell you how much you're going to miss by. This has an opportunity to make me very popular or very controversial in an organization. Because now I'm a time traveler. I've gone out in the future. I've seen what's happened. And I come back and I have news. And I hope you're willing to listen to the news so that we can make adjustments because we have time. That's why you sent me out there. And in reality, I'm talking a 2-quarter sales cycle right here, but that wasn't real to my last business. We had a full year. We had a 12-month sales cycle. So we've got so much time to fix the problem. So I'm way out in December and January looking backwards. How do we solve for that?
Hey, Chris, this is Rob. This is fantastic. I've been in that scenario too many times, so you're making me justifiably uncomfortable. So once you've gone there and you're seeing the gap, did you have an active role, either work with the marketing team, the inside sales team, et cetera, to somehow come up with a campaign or some tactic or so to address the gap?
That's one of the reasons that it worked best that it was me, is because I have the resources to be able to impact the future. So because we're in Q1 and we're looking out at Q2 and Q3, we still have time to impact those. If we were sitting in Q1 trying to impact Q1, like my sales team, I talked to my head of sales yesterday, and she's like, last 8 days, what can we all do together? I mean, there's some stuff, but largely minimal that we're going to do in the next 8 days in marketing to impact sales in the next 8 days. But if we're in Q1 and we're impacting Q2 and Q3, we have plenty of time to immediately act. So what can we do? How do we scrap the campaign that we're working on, move to an outbound motion, go directly after the specific leads we want, use the BDR team, which in this case I also owned, to get the opportunities that can fill in this gap. Also, leaning on the sales team. Hey, we have a goal of 2 meetings a week that you guys create, and none of you are doing it. Getting the assistance of the head of sales to go back into the sales organization and say, this is the objective and you're not following through. We all need to be working to fill this gap. And I mean, we use Slack, and I'm a little bit of I come from a consulting services background, so none of us wanted to sell. And there was a lot of blame and shame in order to get people to act. And I still have that mentality. So I'm not against just having a huge cartoon thermometer that I fill up as we go every day and on Slack to draw attention to the gap that we have between our unweighted goal and our actual unweighted value. But here's the other part. So from a measurement standpoint, like when we started this, the only person that got comped on this was me. My entire bonus plan was tied to being able to hit those numbers for the entire organization, not just mine, not just marketing's, but the entire organization's required unweighted pipeline. What we needed to do was spread that out a little bit more. And I said this was an aligning tool. So obviously demand is measured on weighted pipeline. They're fueling that. Product marketing was measured on weighted pipeline. Because if deals aren't progressing, it might be that we have shitty salespeople, but probably not. I mean, I was involved in hiring them, so what does that say? It just might be that we're not giving them the right messaging, the right tools, the right things to move deals forward. At the same time, our VPs of regional sales were all measured on these numbers in their own territories. Their percentages of these head of sales measured on these. Everybody's participating in getting us to here, because if we all together get us to these numbers, then we're going to be likely to win. To be fair, I don't remember what the next slide is. Maybe I just said everything that's on the next slide. No, this. So just a visualization of this. I know this is a small eye chart, but Salesforce.com does not have great snapshotting. We had to build a lot of this in Microsoft product, Power BI. And so a lot of this was built out custom in Power BI. But what we wanted to see is, against our goal, how are we doing at any given moment? And we want to be able to see this thing grow over time. Things that mattered a lot were the weighted percentage all the way to the right, and the pipeline growth. Over time, we want to see the pipeline continue to grow. We also want to see that we are within our conversion rate from a weighted percentage. When we're down at 8% of weighted percentage, you can imagine that's telling you a story about how you're going to perform in that period of time. We're building for, in that case, Q3 2022. You can assume we're going to have a crap quarter, because that sales cycle that we're fueling has very low progression, even though it grew. So we've got a bunch of pipeline, but we're not doing anything with it. We're not moving it forward. I like to be able to see.
Hey, Chris, we got some
Sure.
questions. Molly's going to chime in, but you just said something I found rather interesting. You're using Power BI for this. Okay,
Yep.
why did you choose to use Power BI to look at pipeline when so many other people are using different tools? This is a bit of a radical approach, and I'd like to hear the justification for it. I find it intriguing.
It's not really that intriguing. It's because that was the only skill set we had in the company. Somebody knew how to do it.
Uh,
It wasn't. We didn't opt for it. We didn't make a business decision. We used Databricks at Axios. Modern technology to do this. But we had somebody that was really whiz bang in Power BI, and he and his brother, who did not work at the company, did a lot of our reports and dashboards in their free time.
yeah, did you find it gave you better insights than, say, a CRM system like Salesforce?
Absolutely, because this is all snapshot data. I need to be able to see this over time. Salesforce does not handle snapshots well, but it also makes it very difficult in Salesforce to just look at it as a single view. Like, this gives me everything I need to know about what happened in this quarter. We started with 3,100,000 in pipeline. We added net new 1 million. We expanded opportunities that existed prior to the beginning of this period by 300,000. We pushed into this period from past period 644,000. So past period in this case would have been current quarter. Like, we're sitting here in this current quarter. This is all happening in the future. We took something out of this quarter, 600,000, pushed it into the next sales cycle. We reduced opportunities, we lost opportunities, and we ended with this 4 million. There's another thing in here that I'm going to talk about in the next slide, which is impact. And that's where this gets really interesting, is what really did we do in this period for the next sales cycle? And if your new and expanded is more than your reduced and lost, forget about rolled in, you had a positive quarter. You grew pipeline the right way. In a lot of cases, rollover saves you. But if you have new and expanded that's less than reduced and lost, everything that everybody did was for nothing, because you have negative impact. You have reduced over time in this period the amount of pipeline that you started with. And even if you roll 3 million in, that rollover is not as valuable because it's past quarter it's old. And what we learn is that anything that sits in discovery for over 45 days, the only thing you've discovered is that you're not really selling software. So anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But by being able to see this over time, again, we start to be able to draw that prediction that based on these percentages of weighted percentage in pipeline growth, we're either healthy as a business or we're not. And this is a thing that we would give our board on a weekly basis.
Chris, we have a couple other questions that I just wanted to flag in the chat. A handful of people are asking about like who really should own this role. Is it the CMO? Is it the CRO? Is it the COO, the CFO? And sort of how to think about that from a C-suite, or really should someone make it their own, hire one specific person for this role that isn't one of those other C-suites? But what do you do with that if it's not affordable for your org?
I think there's a lot of places where it could live. For us, it made sense that it worked the way that it did. And the division of labor was our head of sales focused on current quarter. He had the forecast, he closed the business. So we're healthy in this quarter because he's closing right now. And I'm focused on everything else. In 2 companies ago, when I was at Perfecto, Israeli cloud testing company, we actually hired this role, and it was president. Many of you probably know Reiner Goic. He was hired out of, I think he was at Sophos at the time, and we hired him as president. And this, I didn't know it at the time, but this was his role, was he sat above our head of sales and me, and ran the plays to make sure that we were all impactful and effective. So it could be an individual role. I saw somebody ask, what about RevOps? We had a RevOps organization, but that it's not the right level. They don't have the right levers, and they don't have the right authority. And we'll talk about how this looked and how I ran this in a future slide. It was important to have somebody at the C level be able to run this play.
Right. And then one logistical question, we had someone ask if conversion rate you're using the same as win rate, or if you're referring to conversion rates at each stage of the sales pipeline.
Yes. Yep. Thanks, Molly. Both. So the 25% conversion rate that I talked about there is the close rate, but the conversion rates that we use to determine all of this. So for instance, how we build out weighted, that's at every stage. Conversion from discovery to close, from business alignment to close, from negotiation to close, to be able to make sure that we're leveling this against reality on a quarterly basis.
Thank you.
So is all of that enough? I mean, some of you got here early and you heard me say this to Rob. I mean, when things are good, it's fine. But if you have an issue, or if pipeline is hard, or if there's a disconnect in the organization, if you want to diagnose an issue, no, it isn't. So let's talk about things we can do right now that we can adopt and we can take home. So one of the things was, I mean, again, I talked about the blame and shame culture that I come from. Consolidated pipeline meeting, getting everybody in a room. So everybody is me, head of sales, head of demand, head of BDR, and regional sales leadership. And we're going to start all the way at the top on a weekly basis, looking at production in real time, MQLs, actual versus goal, underlying campaigns, into meetings, BDRs first. There's an expectation, a goal. There's what actually happened. There's the quality of the product from marketing. Are they able to convert? Are they getting meetings? There's also an expectation of our account executives, as well as our customer success managers, getting meetings on the new logo side and on the expansion existing customer side. There's an actual versus a goal that we're going to be looking at. Those customer expansion upsell meetings. As we get into sellers, again, personal meeting goal, actual versus goal, ways to improve those. Then we're going to look at creation and closure. So we've started with top of funnel, We've moved into that mid-funnel conversion, and now we're looking at actually putting dollars in the pipeline or taking them out. And opportunity creation versus closure, we have an expectation of a certain number of creation each week. How are we doing against that? Again, this is times of trouble, times of challenge. I'm going to dig into this every single week, and we're going to talk about it as a group every single week, and we're going to diagnose what's happening and, more importantly, what's not happening every single week. And the spreadsheet, I feel like I have a picture of it, unless I took it out. I don't. This spreadsheet that I use is super manual. Like, I would go in each week and fill in all these things. But the visual of it, and the reason I liked it, was because you could see empty blocks. So I'm looking, at the top level, sales creation, there's a number. But below that are the names of the individual sellers and what they created in their regions, the meetings that they had in their names. And you see the gaps, and that allows you to diagnose at the regional level, at the individual level, where there's problems. And it's not just to uncover, like, dude's not doing his job. I had a seller who was fantastic in a region all to himself, it was UK. And he's creating literally nothing from a pipeline standpoint. I could just say that's his fault. Or in this meeting, in this format, we could diagnose this. What's the problem? Let's work backwards. He's creating nothing. Why? Is he getting meetings? Is his BDR getting meetings? Is he getting any leads? Is there any equity right now in the top of funnel that is feeding him? And in the case of this situation, the answer was no. And it allowed us, back to Rob's question, to act right there. I've got those levers. What can we be doing? What plays could we be running in the UK to fuel this one guy that we see week after week not succeeding, not getting opportunities to close business because he doesn't have any business? And John, yes, everybody in marketing is tied to that unweighted goal. That was my entire bonus plan, and demand and product marketing and content all had that as part of their goal.
Hey, Chris, I wanna challenge one thing here. I think there's an assumption in what you put out here, and the reason I'm saying this is because I've got some scars on my back. If I had a nickel for every board meeting I've been in where we ridiculously debated the meaning of MQL, I'd be a very, very rich man. How did you get alignment of MQL, and what was your classification of MQL, and how did you get everybody on the same page?
So MQL is a very subjective term. I agree. It means a lot of things to a lot of people. In our case, we were running lead scoring. So our raw leads would come in from any source. They would score up to a bar that we had pre-agreed with everybody in the chain. So with the head of BDR, with the head of regional sales, and with the CRO, that this is what an MQL means. And part of this process is if we see in this very meeting that there are a lot of those, however we define them, but not a lot of the next thing, which would be in this case, BDR meetings. That's where that quality of product from marketing comes in. And we can readjust what we think clears the bar for an MQL. There is an expected conversion rate and there's an expected volume coming out of that next stage. If we're not hitting it, that's the discussion we have, is what are you giving us? Why do you think they're okay? And how do we adjust? And again, because we're focusing out on the next, in our case, the next 12 months, we have plenty of time to adjust now to continue to fuel that engine. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I like, especially I like the fact that you're adjusting. Okay, which, one could say adjusting, one could say compensating, but it does need to be adjusted to control the flow. And that level of logic is actually very, very intriguing. So thank you.
So again, like I said, monthly forensic review. This is another thing that I did that I think we could do. We could do right now. It depends on, the institutional trust in the organization of who would run this meeting. But I sat down with our individual sellers on a monthly basis, and we ripped through everything, and they were open to it, was the interesting thing. It often fascinated me that I was allowed to do this based on what my actual job was. But let's look at your meetings from any source. Again, yes, I run marketing, so I care about the ones coming from marketing through the BDR channel, but I also care about yours. I also care about the ones that are coming in from your CSM, all your meetings. What have you got? And then the question is, do you think this is enough? What's the quality of the meetings that you're getting? Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's better if it's good. So ignoring shitty product doesn't solve my problem. How do you feel about your meetings? We had this stage that not every company has, but I guess you could call it an SQL, this interest confirmed opportunity. Literally means we've confirmed interest. Like, we can't use ban, Rachel, because we sell a product that nobody has budget for. AI driven content optimization tools and such are not things that sit in people's budget. And yes, we were a medic shop. But so this interest confirmed opportunity, do you have any of these? Are they sitting for too long? This is not a holding pen. Into those should be turning into dollars. Are you hitting your goal? I expect you to be creating 800,000 in new pipeline on a quarterly basis. Are you doing that? Is that a thing that's happening? Let's talk through your close lost. Why are they closing? How can we do better? And I'm looking for messaging. I'm looking for campaigns that we did that turned into nothing, that led us to opportunities that we're never going to close. Because again, that allows us to go back and readjust. And then I'm taking them out. So we're in current quarter. I want to go and find your cliff. What does your next quarter look like? And the quarter after that? Because at a certain point, you're going to run out of pipeline. You should be, if you're in a 12-month pipeline model, you should be fueling right now for some time 2 or 3 quarters out. How's that looking? Do you have enough coming into next quarter? Because if you don't, if you're only focused on now, you're going to die next quarter. And so I use the example of a clothing company in the winter is producing bathing suits. They're not producing coats. It's cold out now, but they're building bathing suits. And that's how our sellers needed to operate. Is, I know you're closing business and you're super busy, but if you're not producing bathing suits for the summer, you're not going to be able to go to the beach.
Hi, Chris. I just want to, I love the fact that you're talking about meetings here. Most marketing execs talk about SQLs and MQLs, but I think that this is really critical. I spoke to a marketing executive last night, and he said he was full funnel. And I said to him, well, what's your MQL, SQL conversion to meetings? And he had no idea. And I said to him, well, are your meetings tracking up or down this quarter versus last quarter or last year? He goes, well, we don't track that metric. So we still have a lot of marketing people that view themselves as kind of ending at SQL, MQL. I love the fact that you're jumping in on meetings here. And discovery meetings are down this year and last quarter by about 30%. But very few companies are also looking at what are the macro trends in the market. So how do you know if your discovery meetings, say, are down 10%, how do you know if that's good, bad, or different? And are you tracking discovery meetings with customers and prospects too? Because a lot of times people don't really track the customer discovery meetings. They just track the prospect discovery meetings.
So last first, yes. So we had 2 completely different motions at Acrolinx. We had the new business motion, which was in and of itself a 12-month sales cycle, had its entirely own management process. And then we had expansion. And expansion was a 2-quarter sales cycle, entirely different team involved. And the whole process and overlay of everything we're talking about was overlaid over that as well. So that's, we're seeing those customer meetings the same way and measuring those the same way that we would measure a prospect meeting. We just have a faster sales cycle, and we should see a higher conversion rate associated with those opportunities. And back to your question on discovery meetings, it's the conversion from discovery to next stage. I don't need to have a lot of discovery meetings if they're progressing. If I'm discovering that we're doing it wrong, that our messaging isn't sharp, or that we are unable to generate that kind of excitement and interest, that's a thing that we need to solve for. So I have a situation right now where we're a known brand. I've never worked for a known brand before. It's friggin' awesome. If you haven't done it, you really should. And so people come to us with a preconceived notion of what we do, and we're not getting out of discovery the way that we should because we're not hitting the right value driver right out of the gates. We're letting people draw their own conclusions and we're sending them off to go get approval. And so our conversion rate from discovery to evaluation is bad, not good, less than good. And so that shift that we're making right now is to see the conversion rate from discovery to hopefully negotiation increase dramatically over the course of this quarter, so that as we enter next quarter, we know how to fuel for that. I'm compensating for a funnel issue right now at the top of my funnel. Like we need to solve what's happening over here in sales so that we can reduce the overhead that we have at the top of the funnel. So some of this, whether I'm the pipeline officer or not, I still need to be involved in this full cycle. I need to be able to reach into the sales pipeline and see those metrics, understand how we're progressing, how we're creating, so that I know what I need to create on this end. I'm spending a crap ton of money at top of funnel because of things that are happening here. I need to fix these things so that I can scale back this and spend on awareness, for instance.
And John Russo, I know you've had a handful of comments in the chat, specifically around CMO and CFO, and RevOps. I don't know if there's anything specific you'd like to ask or say as part of this conversation as well.
Well, thanks for sharing this point of view. I think it's a great point of view, by the way. So thank you for talking about this. I don't know if there's a clear-cut answer here, but my suggestion on this was I think the CMO could be the steward of the pipeline, meaning Q2 or more, if this function didn't exist, because it elevates the CMO to more of a business level. Otherwise, I think the risk is if the CMO is not able to have this talk track, we become like, here's what marketing has done for the business. And I think that's just a vicious, in my experience as a recovering CMO, I have made that mistake, and it becomes a vicious circle that you just can't get out of. It's, I don't know. So like I'm now an agency owner, and, full disclosure, it's somewhat self-serving. We do a lot of reporting in this area of account and lead based, but I do think that if the CMO takes more of a Q2 or beyond, it elevates that conversation. It elevates the CMO, maybe in the eyes of the board. That's world according to John. Are there other ways to do this? Absolutely. Yeah, I don't disagree. There was somebody else that was commenting in here. There are definitely different ways to do it, but I do think if nobody's owning it, why not throw your hat into that ring? Because I think it just helps the perception of what this function is at the board level.
Absolutely. I mean, I think to your point, there are a number of places this can live in my current company. A lot of the visibility that we have into the engine comes from the hobby of our CFO. I don't think it's her job, but she has interest and aptitude to be able to create dashboards, and she brings a lot of this information to us, which is great. But I'm still creating that sales cycle fueling model that we didn't have. When I got here, I heard things like walking into the next quarter, we're good. But I also heard 2 of our 3 sales motions have a 30-day sales cycle. So I actually don't care about your quarterly value of pipeline. I care about your monthly value of pipeline. What did we do in January, and where did we end January to fuel February? Because a 30-day sales cycle is a 30-day sales cycle. It's not it takes us 30 days to get it done in a quarter. I don't care what you have 2 months from now. I care what you have now. And that's been a thing that I've brought into this business to make everybody think, like, okay, so we're not where we were right now in March. We're not where we were in February. So we're not whole for April. So what's going to happen in April? And that mentality is making the sales organization, again, think a lot more about creation. They didn't think in terms of a creation goal. They thought about creating a total amount of pipeline. Now, individual sellers think in terms of, I got to do 225,000 of creation right now. Yeah, you do. So working backwards, what does that mean for us in marketing? What do we need to do to make sure that we're fueling them to be able to create that money? And again, it ties everybody together. What you walk into in most businesses is that marketing person saying, we killed it, and I don't care what happens downstream. Sales isn't hitting their number, but we got our bonus. And that's why people fight. That's why salespeople don't like marketing people. I don't like that. I don't need to be like that. Um, and that's why comping on this is so important. So this is what I did. In this case, and I put CMO, but just me as CPO, unweighted and weighted pipeline was my primary. That, I mean, in addition to C-level executive bonus goals in a company, my unit goal was unweighted and weighted pipeline for the next future sales cycle at any given quarter. And that was across both new logo and expansion. My demand leadership, they had goals for those SQLs that were accepted. I call them interest confirmed opportunities, and discovery ops created. They don't do either of those things. They don't accept an SQL and they don't create an opportunity, but they can't be comped on something that they control. So handing something over isn't the comp point. Sellers accepting and sellers creating is a much better alignment model for them, because now they're on the hook. And if sellers aren't creating, it's their fault. It's not just the sellers. For field marketing, same thing. SQLs accepted, discovery ops created. Product marketing, weighted pipeline, progression, or closed won conversion. They should be on the hook for making sure deals move forward. So in my current company, product marketing is their primary objective, their primary measurement is our close won conversion rate. Why? Because I want them to think about that a lot. Messaging, positioning, packaging, competition, all of that plays to our ability to close business. CRO was gold on unweighted and weighted. Sales VPs gold on regional unweighted and weighted. So we're all in on this together. Everybody cared. When we started this, it was just me. I was the only one, and nobody else cared at all. And it was a really lonely road, because I'm screaming about something that everybody's like, yeah, that's interesting. That would be really cool if we had that, but nobody's comped on it. If I had my way, my impulse, my evil, dark impulse is to carve out part of the commission model for the salespeople and hold it out as MBO associated with this. That's what I would have done if anybody had let me. Answer: I don't want to do this again. I'm good. I'm all set with that. It was a huge learning opportunity. I learned a lot, and I use it every day. But you're the time traveler. I get sent to the future. Rolling 4 quarters model, I'm way out in the future to identify issues and cliffs and sand dunes. And in the time period when the business is receptive to that kind of news, like, hey, we got a cliff coming up in Q3, and we need to fill that cliff in so that we don't fall off it. It's exciting. It's central. It feels very vital. But when you come back from the future and people are like, oh, what'd you learn? And you tell them, and they're like, I don't know, though. That might not be true. I can show you in the last 20 quarters why this is true and why this is predictive. But if nobody cares about it, it's lonely out there. And so I think what I learned is valuable. What I learned, I use in my current role. But I would not suggest to anybody to want to be this, because eventually they turn on you. You know too much, and nobody likes the answers. So that's what I've got. Happy to continue to talk and ask questions or answer questions, or we could just break out and everybody can yell at me and tell me why they think I'm wrong. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so I can see your faces.
Chris, a question for you. This is fascinating. When you mentioned about if you're in Q1 and we're going to miss pipeline, and sales goes to the CEO and says, we need marketing to drop everything and put all their resources into short-term, 1 week, 2 week programs. And invariably, the CEO says, "Great idea. I'll tell them to do that." How do you handle that? When you have a 2 month or 3 month sales cycle, it seems to happen all the time. CEOs go for that bait, CFOs go for that bait. And to your point, it's huge waste of time and a distraction on future activities. But how do you stop that cycle that still continues today? It's probably happening right now in thousands of companies.
And to be fair, literally, I had this conversation with my head of sales yesterday. What can we do in the next 8 days? And I mean, the technical answer is, from a programmatic standpoint, nothing, because anything that we do is going to have, and I can show you on paper how long it takes to get from the creation of a lead to the conversion of a lead to the handoff of a lead to the working of a lead to get to the sales cycle that we're not even at yet, so that you can work it and close it. So even with a 30-day sales cycle, like, we've got 8 days. So the technical answer is nothing, and people need to accept that. That's just fact. Like, don't suck me into your fantasy. This is not a real thing. But at the same time, I had that conversation with Lindsay yesterday, and there's some stuff that we could try, and we're going to do some crazy things that are going to be very quick hits. And if we can, I mean, we're ripping into all of our closed lost opportunities from Q3 and Q4. We're looking at all the people that visited our pricing page, like quick things where we could just send a quick email and be like, "Hey, end a quarter deal." But that's not real. Like, that's not a program. That's not planning, and it is distracting. I mean, my head of demand was like, "I'm sorry, what?" "Yeah, no, put everything down for a couple of minutes. We're gonna play some games." But it's games, and I think we all have to understand that it's games, because the real program has long-term impact. And we're aiming to fill, right now, we're sitting here in March, we're aiming to fill, in our case, April for SMB, April for mid, and the next quarter. So we're still working on Q2 for our enterprise business, because we have a 3-month sales cycle there. That's where we're impactful. If you want me to be impactful past that, I maybe could be. But right now, there's nothing we can do. And then when you amplify that in the Acrolinx world, where we had a 12-month sales cycle, like, we're sitting in January, and you're like, "What can you do for March?" Like, literally next to nothing. It takes you 12 months to close a deal. So anything I give you now, you won't even be in discovery at the end of March. Like, prove me wrong. And
I like what you're saying, Chris,
wrong.
on the fact of, you say we can do nothing, but you are actually doing some things, because you can't really do nothing, right? The politics is you can't do nothing, but you kind of, it's going to have little or no impact, but you kind of go along to keep everyone happy a little bit, like marketing is doing everything they can do to bring in revenue in a week.
Yep. And it's fun. I mean, that's the fun part of what we do, is like, we're problem solvers. What can we do? What are the crazy things that we can do? Programmatically, the answer is nothing.
Good.
I think this is a hot button issue. If we're getting surprised that, here we are at the 11th hour, and we've all been here, and this is more the norm. If we're surprised at the 11th hour that we're going to miss, and they're coming to the CMO or whomever with a 12-month sales cycle to go and pull a rabbit out of the hat, that's just an indication that there's a problem in leadership. I'm sorry. Either the executive meetings aren't sufficiently covering, the pipeline issue, but you should not get, again, maybe I'm being a little bit too philosophical, but you shouldn't be surprised at the 11th hour. But every single person on this call has been in that bullshit meeting. And so I wish there were a way, and Chris, I'm thinking that, maybe you have the ultimate solution, because we've got a chief pipeline officer, that we could avoid this train wreck. Are there any insights into a takeaway here for everybody on the call? How do we, I can't say we can eliminate that 11th hour, the house is on fire, but how can we maybe lessen it or get more ahead of it?
I mean, in my world, again, we still think quarterly in this business, but we sell monthly. So if we fuel January the way we fuel anything else, and we're successful closing in January, it takes the pressure off March. And we should get out of this end of quarter rush that everybody finds themselves in every quarter. Um, and I mean, to some extent, I love it. I love watching it. The sales team is killing it right now, and there's emails every day. We're a very young sales organization, so they're on Slack with emojis and fire and Giphies and it's really fun to watch. But also, I want to see that at the end of January and at the end of February, and we're starting to do that as we make this progression towards really fueling for where we need it. And I mean, immature model, all I did was take the quarterly number and cut it in three. There's no seasonality, there's no month dip, there's no nothing. I didn't look at the reality of how we actually have sold in the past. I just said, if you say you need to do 225, you need to do 75 a quarter or a month, done. And that's what we're going to fuel for. And that mentality, I mean, there was another person in this role before me, and they did things completely different. So there's a process of undoing what was done to get to what we need to be. But everybody's super receptive. And I think we all believe that we'll be better aligned and we'll be fighting for the same goal if we get to where we all think we can be with this model.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, this is Simran. You said something earlier that that was interesting when you went into that job, and you said, I didn't know what this other person did, what the responsibility was. And a lot of what we're talking about here is about the culture and about what people's expectations are, right, of everybody else. Yep. And I mean, we've all been in meetings. We've all been in the QBR, and and basically feels like they're beating up on the salesperson, or, this whole sort of blaming culture, right? But what I was going to say is that you're talking about people not understanding this is a future activity. I think it's important, at least I found it important, to explain like what this is to everybody, from the BDR all the way up, right? Product. Everybody has to understand what this role is and why it exists and how it's going to, work, so that they don't come to you and say, what can you do for me right now? If they understood that what you're doing is, creating opportunity 6, 9, 12 months out, makes it a lot better. But that also is a leadership issue. But that's the thing that I've always seen. If people don't understand what the other person's doing, then that's a disaster, basically.
100%. Agree.
I know, Isabel, you had your hand raised. I just want to make sure we leave time for your final, and then we'll wrap everything up. I want to be conscious of time.
Thank you, Molly. Chris, I may not be really articulate with this, but over the last 2 years, we were following a similar program, especially working really, really closely with the SDRs to make sure that we were achieving the relevant meetings so that sales team had an opportunity to close deals. The data made it apparent that the sales team was not educated enough to manage the sale, nor to carry the conversations they need to carry. And the conversations with sales leadership were particularly difficult before board meetings, when the answers were right there and they were really obvious what the problems were. So I'm just curious how you've navigated that in a way that you don't undermine this partner that you've just spent 2 years building up, so that you have this really trusted relationship.
Yeah, everything that we did and reported in board meetings, we did together. So it was important that my pipeline numbers look a lot like his forecast, for instance. The sound you hear is my dog just woke up. So Shane and I were glued together at the hip. And when we presented in the same session in the board meeting. And what was interesting is we stopped at a certain point talking about marketing altogether at the board level. Like, we didn't really go into the campaigns that we were running, the approach that we were taking, and the overall strategy that I had for how we marketed the software, because that wasn't interesting to them. They wanted to see that progression of what was actually happening, and again, seeing it through the lens of the total process of what I was doing into what he was doing and how it dovetailed. And we also had the full buy-in and support and alignment with the CEO. So it was a very centralized, singular view of the entire engine, designed by and reported on by the three of us. And any one of the three of us could talk about it the exact same way, which was important. If we deviated at all, it was a problem. And you can imagine, for the people that think that RevOps should be a bigger part of this, over time they had to be, because now we've got a CEO that's looking at numbers, me looking at numbers, Shane looking at numbers, potentially looking at different versions of numbers. And we had to rebuild a lot of what we were doing individually in Power BI in different systems so that we had that singular view, so that we didn't fall off the rails.
Wow, we're about at the end of our time. Thank you so much for Chris. First of all, thank you for sharing your expertise, your experience, your pros and cons of that role. I think you got us all thinking, even if we don't carry that title, we need to think like a chief pipeline officer. So that's certainly what I'll be thinking about as well. So practical, collaborative, insightful. That's what we always strive for our SAMI sessions to be. This recording will be available in the meetup group. We'll make an announcement when that's available. So if anybody, you want to share it, or you want to listen to it again, or take a look at some of those Chris's slides, you can do that. We've got 2 more great sessions coming up this spring on April 23rd, which for those of you who are good with dates, that's actually a Tuesday rather than a Thursday because of our speakers' availability. We're going to have April Dunford, and the session's called Need Marketing and Sales Acceleration. It's your positioning, stupid. So out of typical Sammy snarky fashion. So we're going to get into positioning. April is a world-renowned expert on positioning, and we're going to have that announced in the meetup group later today, and it'll be open for registration. And then in May, we're going to have Georgiana Laudy. She's from Forget the Funnel. And this will be a great follow-on to April because she's got a section called How to Get More Customers Without More Marketing. So I think that'll be a great one. It's coming up, a couple great sessions coming up in April and May. Watch Meetup. So that's the place. Go to Meetup, check your settings, make sure you get these announcements as they happen. And as always, if there are topics you want to hear from us, let the EC members know and we'll try to get the speakers. Molly, thank you so much for leading the conversation. Chris, again, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for being with us. Hope the rest of your Thursday is great. And we'll see you April 23rd.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Feel
everybody.
free to look me up
Thanks,
on
Chris, for
LinkedIn.
joining us. All right. Bye, all.